The occurrence we're about to talk about is to do with the brakes on a Cessna Caravan. The aircraft had completed a 200-hourly inspection and went outside for a ground run. On the ground run, one of the brakes wouldn't hold the aircraft under power and was slipping. When the aircraft came back into the hangar for further investigation, they found that the back shells on the brake caliper were all loose. When the engineer was asked, he said, "I torqued the back shells to the correct torque." So what had happened? Interestingly, on this check, there were two jobs. One was on the aircraft park brake, and the other was to replace the brake pads. So because one of the engineers had applied the park brake, when the other engineer replaced the brake pads, the extra thickness of the pads, when they were installed, there was nowhere for the hydraulic fluid to go. So he was able to torque all of the back shells, even though there was a small gap between the back shell and the caliper. This only materialized when the brakes were released to remove the aircraft from the hangar, and subsequently on the aircraft engine run. Because the park brake was on, there was nowhere for the hydraulic fluid to go, so it was possible to follow the instructions of the manual, install the brake pads, put on the back shells and torque them, but there's still to be an underlying problem with the system and it to be not safe. So I'd never come across this occurrence before, but it's fascinating to see that some of these things can happen. But now I'm aware of it, now we've talked about it, now this story has been shared, it's less likely to happen to me and hopefully to you. After routine maintenance of a PT6 engine, it was noticed that the blue O-ring on the outlet fuel filter bowl was still visible. The torque had been applied to the filter bowl, but it wasn't enough to seat the O-ring. On further investigation, two issues came apparent. One, the run-in torque of the O-ring had not been added to the torque of the filter bowl. Secondly, the manual says to only use engine oil on the O-ring, and Vaseline had been used to lubricate the O-ring. This may have caused the O-ring to swell slightly, increasing the run-in torque of the O-ring. In looking in the manual, there is a note in the manual which says, "Seat the filter bowl housing to the pump before you apply the torque." I had this exact same situation happen when I was working in Tanzania. The aircraft had gone out of the hangar after maintenance, and on the ground run, a massive fuel leak developed and sprayed the entire inside of the engine bay with fuel. We found that the blue O-ring on the outlet filter bowl had popped out for the exact same reason. The torque to the bowl had been applied, but it wasn't enough to seat the O-ring. So could these occurrences have been avoided? Would a wet motoring run of the engine show the leak of the filter bowl? Ask yourself the question, does it look right? Does it feel right? Do I have any parts left over? If you're asked to do an independent check, are you looking at the small detail of what's been disturbed? Or are you checking the function of the whole system? All of these things come together to make us more situationally aware of the aircraft and make the aircraft safer and our work safer, having less maintenance escapes, so that when planes leave the hangar, they are serviceable and ready to go flying.